And back. So, force concentration and focus fire. Why is this a very important deal? Well, when you're particularly starting out in League of Legends, a lot of players have this tendency to think very egocentric. It's very easy to think or worry about, what am I going to be doing in this game? Specifically, what is my build going to be? What if I fight an assassin in my lane, which is my big weakness? What if, what if I build wrong? What if I don't get enough creep score for the build I want? What if my lane mate is just really bad if I'm bottom lane and I can't harass my enemy? What am I going to do? There's a lot of this egocentric thinking. I'm not saying egocentric in a bad way, I'm just saying it in an objective way. A lot of players very early on think a lot about themselves and what they will do, and there's this mistaken belief that your build is going to determine if you win or lose. A lot of the time the fact is that, for example, Kog'Maw is always going to be Kog'Maw. No matter what you build with him, he's going to be useful in a fight, because he is bloody Kog'Maw. Kog'Maw hurts. I'm slowing it down for a moment because Fraps is doing something very strange. Gods, I hate it when Fraps does that. Well, whatever, I'm just going to keep talking for a few moments anyway. The thing is, when you're starting in the game, you just... Thank you, Fraps! Excuse me for a... Well, it seems that Fraps wants to behave now, which is very nice. So, where was I? Yes, very early on in particular, sometimes new players to the game will feel that their build and what they do is going to determine very much if they win or lose the game. But the thing is that many champions don't really need all that much items. Yes, they become incredibly strong with certain items. It's very correct to think with certain characters that, well, Irelia for example, it's very correct to think that as soon as I get my Trinity Force, I am going to become much more dangerous and basically win my lane. That can happen. But you often don't need to think quite that much. You don't need to worry that much about things like your own specific build, because as long as there's two of you and one enemy, you can pretty much win with almost any build you have, as long as you are the correct level, and as long as you aren't building something completely idiotic like AD for Anivia. I mean, maybe you can make it work, but don't build something really stupid like 5 boots of speed. As long as you're building something halfway sensible, you don't have to be very precise with your build in order to win, as long as you make sure that your force concentration and your focus firing is proper. Here we see blue team chase you really away a bit. Nunu does the ultimate, a bit half-baked, really bit too soon. And yeah, we sort of see a good focus fire happen there. We can in fact go back for a few moments and just, see exactly what happened. I'm going to slow it down a little. Yes, the purple team is very divided here. We can see Jarvan moving down here for some reason. Irelia is moving away, and Anivia has a good position attack. Nunu does that little thing. Kog'Maw, what happened there? Did he flash there? Maybe ends up in a bad position and gets caught. Nunu gets force concentrated by all these 3 players. There's just very good focus fire here. Jarvan did nothing in the entire team fight. There seems to have been some miscommunication there. But yeah, at this point you do these maneuvers where you try to find a position where as many of your team as possible can attack one enemy at a time. there's a lot of techniques for doing that. You can ambush the enemy, you can try to surround him from surprise angles, you can try to bait and catch him.
Purple team double kill.
That was... yeah. What happens here is... well, Anivia gets dropped and it's a 2 versus 1. Anivia comes back and it's a 2 versus 1 but gets off a revenge kill. That was a 4-4-4 exchange, if I'm not horribly mistaken. I think it was. Or a 3-4-4 or something like that. I don't believe that either team really benefited from that greatly. Anivia is level 18 now, out-leveling everyone else in the game. Yeah, pretty much everyone else, particularly on the blue team. There's just no one who can stand up to Anivia just by themselves. This is very often the role of the AP carries in the game. If you play the AP carry, what you want to do is you want to have some utility to have a presence in team fights. Crowd control, for example, stuns, charms, slows, whatever it may be. And during the mid game, when you have your core items up, you should be really powerful. In this case, Anivia has gotten very lucky as well, has gotten a good amount of kills, just lots of kills, no deaths, and is just basically dominating the mid game here. Gets very cocky, in fact, goes up against 3 enemies and is shut down immediately. And we can see just how, well, how Anivia perceived himself in this fight. Just, you know, thought, I can kill anyone. And with good reason. In 1 versus 1, maybe Anivia could. Now, purple team gets focused a lot by everyone. Very nasty. Jarvan goes in for some reason and gets chased away. Yeah, blue team is just more powerful in this case. And Anivia, the star player of purple team, was gone, which... yeah, which means that purple team doesn't have that wonderful long-range artillery because... well, Kog'Maw hasn't gotten into the late game phase yet. He's very close. He does a lot of damage already, but we see the chain vest, he's building some defense, and I think that he should. At the moment he's very squishy. Without the crowd control from Anivia, you know, the stuns and the slows, and just the fact that Anivia scares the opponent so much that they can't dive. Yeah, Kog'Maw won't really do the same type of wreck the entire enemy team solo that he does late game. Kog'Maw is a bit more of a late game champion. When the game goes really long, like 35 minutes plus, then Kog'Maw becomes incredibly dangerous. Anivia stays pretty dangerous, but towards the very late game, most AP carries start to lose steam, sort of. They don't do quite as well later on. Wonderful, wonderful, lovely. Well, where were we? Yes, most AP carries are great in the mid-game part of the game, but they sort of drop off a bit in their horrifying strength near the late game of the game. Yeah, it's pretty true for most AP carries. There's a couple of exceptions, I guess you could say. For example, Cassiopeia and Ryze and I guess God, what is his name? Mordekaiser are examples of AP carries that still do really nice amount of damage even very late game. But these champions, these AP carries with more burst style damage such as Anivia generally tend to drop off a bit in the very late game. Anivia is still a very good choice here because Anivia brings to the table a lot of very nice crowd control abilities. Kog'Maw just checks the Baron, seeing what health it has, seeing if it's being attacked by anything. No, there's not. Blue team hides in the bush there, places a ward, strangely enough. I actually think that was a mistake, because that tipped purple team off to the fact that they were there. Now, that action over there with Amumu was very nice aim by Ezreal, just nicked a whole lot of enemies all at once. What happened here was that, well, Amumu died. And again, because of forced concentration principle, stating that he should have died. He was alone in this area against several enemies, while 4 members of the blue team were essentially fighting here against 2 members of the purple team, if I remember correctly. And what happens then is, of course, that 4 players will defeat 2 players. Sona escapes with extremely little health because she has her teammates there to help. Planning for this type of gameplay is very important. It pretty much happens in all the higher level play of League of Legends. It is very rare that you encounter these moments where, well, where the game will be determined by your own solo ability to fight the enemy team. It just should not happen. You should always have more teammates around you than the enemy. Of course, there are situations when this doesn't quite work. For example, if you see that your enemy is very prepared for that type of gameplay where he intends to always be in a large blob and just never send anyone out alone, you can put pressure on him by just attacking all of the lanes, like Riven is doing here, doing damage against the enemy team's turret, while the enemy team is sort of clustered up in other places. This puts pressure on the enemy team on multiple fronts and basically makes them have to choose between dividing their forces and making them easier to pick apart, or just going really aggressive with the blob they have. For example, if you send a champion top and a champion bottom, the enemy team can choose to try and push all their champions down the mid lane, and that's not in the scope of this episode. That goes into some very difficult judgment calls that each team has to make at the time. It's very difficult to decide if you should split lanes push or not. Very nice wall up by Anivia there, actually, in my opinion. Other than the fact that Amumu seemed to have gotten trapped in a very bad position. Purple team was sort of split up and couldn't bring all their force to bear on the enemy, so Anivia walled off all the enemies and allowed them to retreat and get into a better position. And that's really good, actually. It was unfortunate that Nunu died, but it would have been catastrophic if they had stayed and tried to fight, because they were just sort of split up here and up here, while all the enemy team were coming up from the bush, which is a hard place to attack someone in when they are in the bush. You can't really see them properly, you can't really target them with all your abilities. Yeah, that's sort of how it goes. We're seeing that the scores are starting to equalize a bit. Blue team has more luck in the team fights. Again, they have some really nasty teamfight abilities. They have Sona with the ultimate that just stuns the entire enemy team. They have Amumu which pretty much does the same thing. Lots of crowd control, they have a great amount of, well, damage. Ezreal is starting to come along very nicely. He has the Trinity Force and the Bloodthirster. Very nice combination of items. Maybe not optimal, but again, it doesn't really matter if you are on equal terms with your enemy. Every now and then you do have to build something to counter an enemy. That does happen. For example, Ezreal has Berserker's Greaves, but if he was getting hit a lot by stuns and stuff by the enemy, which hasn't really been happening this game, but if it did, he would build a Mercury Threads. Just, you know, sometimes you have to build something specific based on how the game is going. But really, Ezreal is always Ezreal. As long as, you know, the team moves properly, it's not that important exactly what he builds. Important is the focus firing, because they are beautiful. Now, purple team goes in for the Baron and gets it. And now Amumu is basically surrounded by the entire enemy team. Amumu is one of the few champions where this is not a great problem, because he has that horrifyingly strong ultimate. One purple team member gets chased away, the others retreat, and the blue team just sort of picks apart Kog'Maw, all of them focusing on him. Yeah, we pretty much... that's sort of one of the very good reasons why you want crowd control on your team. It gives you an opportunity to focus whoever you want. Let's say that Amumu jumps into the enemy team and just stuns everybody. What you now have is a few moments during which the enemy is disorganized and you can choose one of them to just attack. You pick them apart when they are disorganized. Alistar does this very nicely as well, and in a very demonstrable fashion. Sona got killed there because she got trapped by Anivya's wall, and then it was 3 against 1. Just further reinforcing the point that force concentration is the way to go in this game. Now, say you have Alistar. His abilities are tremendous for crowd control because they really bounce the enemy around. They throw the enemy here and there, and they just make it very difficult for the enemy team to organize a defense, to decide who they should target, because even if they are choosing something along the lines of, oh, let's all gang up on Ezreal, with someone like Alistar or Blitzcrank or Jarvan, you may find that your teammates are just isolated in positions where they cannot bring enough firepower on that one person to bear, and so the plan starts to fall apart. Disruptive team compositions like that are really nasty to play against, not easy at all. That's another possibility that you can think about. You can have a team that goes this sort of stun lock crowd control system where you just want to stop the enemy from being able to do anything, or you can have a more disruptive one that just aims to sort of knock the enemy around a lot, make it very difficult for them to move and get into position. I've seen teams entirely based on a Blitzcrank that just try to pick off one enemy at a time, kill him, and then move on to the next one, which works better late game when the spawn timers are so incredibly high. So there's a couple of ways that you can think about it, but generally what you want to succeed in is get one enemy at a time to kill that enemy. Now you're facing 4 against 5, and so on, so on. It's not that often that you encounter these team fights in high-level play where it's a brawl fight, where everyone is just sort of trying to build, how am I going to survive this fight? Like, everyone expects to be the one targeted by the enemy, so everyone builds defense and everyone builds attack, and it just becomes this cluster where everyone is sort of attacking everything. That very rarely happens because it is so very effective to have something like a completely fed Kog'Maw who can just rip apart even a tank in seconds, and then just base your tactics on having champions like Blitzcrank. I love to use Blitzcrank as an example because he's great for that type of play, and just have champions that isolate the enemy and then let the entire team quickly dispatch that one player and then just move on to the next phase of whatever the plan was. That usually is so economical and so much. It's just really good strategy. The risks are very low because you're not putting yourself entirely in the enemy's grip. You don't have to go all in against the enemy. You can just sort of nibble at them and take one champion at a time. Or even in a team fight, you can pretty much still isolate them, keep them disoriented, kill one at a time, which is the ideal, and try to get as few losses on your side as possible. That's pretty much the preferred way of playing, because if you have a team that sort of is based on everyone getting into melee, well, not exactly the range carries, but just getting really close to the enemy and just duking it out. The problem is if your enemy is someone who has something like a Sona. So you attack with your Jarvan and Irelia and Riven and, you know, all of these champions in the same team, just hypothetically, something similar. You attack the enemy team without having a lot of crowd control. If they have crowd control, you're going to lose one champion at least before you get to properly start brawling with the enemy. So yeah, you pretty much want crowd control because things like stuns and knockbacks and things can give you the opportunities to apply proper force concentration. Whew. That's kind of the late game application of concentration. Focus fire is more direct. It's what happens when you basically have locked lines. All the enemy team members are just next to you. All you have to care about is just pick one who is the most dangerous, kill him immediately. For example, if all the purple team teleported next to blue right now, they should maybe kill Sona or Amumu because those are the crowd controllers of their team. And if they are dead, then they can pretty much continue doing what they want. Or they can choose to kill someone like Ezreal, because Ezreal might be becoming their damage dealer. So focus fire is more direct like that. You just choose, okay, we are going to take losses ourselves. We can't help that. Let's make the best of a bad situation. Who do we kill to hurt the enemy as much as possible? and hope that they can single out one of ours to hurt in the same way. It's not as elegant as proper force concentration, but it's effective and it's also something you need to learn. It is in fact often what most new players learn first. It's what you see in random public games when someone says, you know, focus Ezreal or focus Kassadin, whatever. The point is, the first thing players do often learn is everyone should focus one enemy player. Well, that doesn't always work out that well. Sometimes the player you should be focusing is the one that is isolated and out of position. But that's sort of difficult to tell people in a random game. They don't always understand what you're talking about. But with experience, you sort of learn what that content is all about. Focus fire isn't a bad thing. It's usually good to have. You know, if you can kill, say, Ryze, then let's go for Ryze. That's a good backup plan to have in mind. Now, blue team is starting to work up some steam. They are really starting to get some power. They are pushing purple team back. In all the team fights, it has been almost equal what's been happening. Blue team has been inching away with like 1 kill more than purple in a lot of situations. And they're catching up. Purple team is getting strong, blue team is getting strong. They're not exactly equal, but they're getting there. They're getting there. We can see that Kog'Maw has an advantage on Ezreal, more kills, more creep score, but Ezreal has a ton of assists, so I would say that they're about equal in strength-ish. Nunu gets caught out of position, is too far forward, Amumu... Well, we basically saw that exact thing happening there that I was talking about. I'm going to move back a few moments, and you can see that the game is almost over. This is essentially the last team fight before the game ends. After this fight, one team will just surrender. Not sure if that is the correct way to do. Maybe they just got really tired. It has been a 46-minute game. That is grueling for many players. When you get sort of beaten that late, you just sort of feel, well, we don't want to have to think that hard. It's too difficult. It's stressful. We just want to start playing again. Anyway, Nunu gets caught there, purple team was out of position, very damaging. And Amumu does this just stun lock of 2 of them. Kog'Maw had to flee because, well, he was probably afraid that he was going to be focus fight first. But they finished off Nunu. Then blue team is just sort of gone, so of course Amumu dies because it's focus 2. And yeah, this beautiful Ezreal ultimate that hits all of them, this wonderful Sona ultimate that also hits all of them, lots of crowd control, lots of damage. Yeah, blue team just picks purple team apart. There was that wonderful bit of baiting, where one of the blue team moves forward, gets the attention of purple team and draws purple team back forward. In fact, let's have a quick look at that. I really like that maneuver. Maybe that was a bit too far. Yes, what happens here with Riven? Riven is sort of up here. Amumu is obviously dead, but Riven stays here fighting for a bit, even dashes forward and then moves her way and sort of tries to draw purple team towards her. That was a bait and then a trap, because then blue team showed up and just smacked them down. Lots of abilities that hit all of the enemies, able to hit all of them at the same time. Painful, devastating. Doing a Guardian Angel and the Anivia Egg, those players are essentially not part of the game anymore. Ezreal gets killed amazingly there by that ultimate by Anivia. And yeah, Ryze is able to take down Irelia. Irelia does a lot of nice damage, but not as much as the late game Ryze. He is one of these AP carries who still stays very strong at very late game. I mean, if you want an AP carry that does a lot of damage late game as well, Ryze is a good choice, he really is. And yeah, what basically ends up happening now is that blue team just marches in, just ignores the turret damage, and yeah, the game is pretty much over at this point.
Purple team's turret has
So
been destroyed.
yeah, that's the analysis of force concentration and a little bit on focus firing.
Purple team's inhibitor
What you
has been
should
destroyed.
sort of take from this is just that, yeah, it doesn't matter as much what your exact build is. It doesn't matter exactly
Purple
what
team's
your
turret
champion
has
is.
been destroyed.
As long as you move in a, as long as you keep in mind these strategies that you will hopefully formulate upon starting the
Purple
level.
team's turret has been
Just
destroyed.
okay, I got a little bit confused at the end, but yeah. Basically, you want to take the enemy out one by one, and there are champions who can do this, and there are maneuvers you can do to do this. We have seen a few here. We have seen that ganking is a great way. It turns a 2 versus 2 at bottom into a 3 versus 2. Ganking is a great way of force concentration. If you find someone out of position, you can just gang up on him immediately. You can use traps to isolate enemies. You can use great crowd control, which basically puts everyone out of the fight for a few moments and then takes someone out. Basically, yeah, that's the basis of force concentration. Yeah. See you next time.
Never turn your back on friends. Oh,